Well, good evening, and I'd like to call to order this planning meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores. Welcome everyone in the council chambers. The first order of business is additions, deletions, or amendments, and we have nothing under that. The next is disclosure of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility. Nothing declared. Then the next item then is adoption minutes, and it's been moved by Councillor Minaj, seconded by Councillor Grace. Planning Committee minutes dated February the 20th, 2018 are hereby approved as circulated. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. So this evening we have one other item, and it's a public meeting. And the intent is really this evening is to have the planner give us a report. We'll have the applicant if he would like to speak to it, and then we'll ask any member of the public or a member of the committee. And really it's just for gathering information for the purpose of making a recommendation to this committee at a later date. So with that, I'll turn it over to our planner, Tessa.
Thank you. So as mentioned, this is a zoning bylaw amendment application. The property doesn't have a municipal address, but it's just on the outside of Burgoyne. And it is brought forward by Barry's Construction on behalf of Kaylee's Green. So just to give an overview, so this is a development proposal to rezone a portion of the subject property in order to facilitate the creation of 2 vacant residential lots in the hamlet community of Burgoyne. So the lots would be rezoned from Agricultural Special A1 and Agricultural Special Holding A49H to Residential First Density Special A12, or R12. So the R12 zone is relatively common across Saugeen Shores, and the special provisions within that zone allow for lots on private services, provided that the lot is sufficient to accommodate a septic system and obtain a potable water supply, has a 3-meter side yard setback on one side, and meets all the remaining R1 provisions. There is environmental protection zones on the property, and they are not proposed to be changed as part of this application. So as in support of this application, a D54 sewage system assessment was provided, which demonstrates that the lots can accommodate the septic system, and that's available for review and online and has been reviewed by town staff, I believe. An archaeological assessment was also received, which was prepared by Fisher Archaeological Consulting for the proposed lots. So this is the entirety of the property here. This intersection is where we've got the hamlet community. It is currently in agricultural use, and the surrounding land uses are residential and agricultural. It is proposed to be serviced on private servicing, and will take the lots will take access off of Bruce Road 3. This is Bruce Road 3. So you know, north is over this way, and the 2 proposed lots are right here. So at the southern extent of the hamlet of Burgoyne, and that's where they're proposed to be located. So the intersection is just up here. So in terms we've looked at the PPS in terms of the official plan policies. These are the ones that are somewhat important here. So we've got the brown is rural in the official plan. This kind of white hashed area is hazard in the official plan. And then the red is the hamlet community designation. And so the 2 lots are proposed to be right here at the end, within the settlement area. So wholly within that red part on the property. In terms of the zoning bylaw, so the solid green is the A1. That kind of hash green is the A49H, and then the blue is EP. So the A49H, the holding provision there, before the holding can be lifted, an archaeological assessment must be received. And one has been received for just the portion that is proposed to be developed. So they didn't do the ARC assessment for the whole A49H zone, just that area there. And so the holding provision can be lifted from that that part of the property, but won't be lifted for the remainder. So the balance of the property will remain A1 and A49H with some EP as well. So, as mentioned. So in terms of the official plan policies, Section 5.2.4.1 of the Bruce County OP directs limited growth to the hamlet communities, and we would consider 2 lots in this case to be considered limited growth. And the proposal should have minimal impact on the historic character of the hamlet, is of a reasonable size, has minimal impact on environmentally sensitive areas and areas of cultural significance, and could be adequately serviced on private services. So those are the considerations when looking at adding property into the hamlet community. Yeah, in terms of the zoning, as mentioned, the special provisions for the A1 and the A49H currently do not allow residential development. That's basically why it's a special agricultural zone. It doesn't allow any residential development currently, and that would remain on the balance of the property. So there wouldn't be any residential development allowed outside of the hamlet community on the property. But yeah, as mentioned, the 2 lots in question were included within the settlement area of Burgoyne, and as such, there is an expectation of development on these lots. And but however, any future expansion of the settlement area should only be done with serious consideration to the impacts on the surrounding agricultural lands. So in terms of consultation that's already been done, town staff noted that there is no objection to the rezoning, and that they are expecting to collect 5% cash in lieu of parkland dedication as part of the consent process at the time of the lot creation, but they have no additional comments related to this proposal. In terms of the other agencies circulated, the SPCA did provide comments on hazard lands on natural heritage. As you saw, a portion of the property is within the environmental hazard. But no changes are proposed to the EP zone as part of this application. There are some natural heritage features affecting the property, which include significant woodlands, potentially significant wildlife habitat, fish habitat, and potentially the habitat of endangered and threatened species. However, the SPCA did not recommend the preparation of an EIS at this time for the proposal. The proposal will, however, be subject to the SPCA's regulatory process, and their permission will be required prior to development. But the zoning bylaw amendment is acceptable to SPCA staff. So the applicant has been aware of that requirement, and I believe are working with the SPCA to meet their requirements. But there were no other matters arising from other circulated agencies. There were, at the time of writing this, there was only one. There have now been 2 comments received opposing the development from neighboring landowners. So one of the comments received was opposing any change from agricultural to residential zoning, and they stated that council should recognize the need to preserve our farmland. And we appreciate those comments that were received, and I've added some comments in the report just to note that our policies do strongly encourage the preservation of farmland. These lands, however, despite their agricultural use, are within the settlement area of Burgoyne, and such there is an expectation of development. The subject property is also designated rural, as opposed to agricultural in the official plan, which means that its soils have not been deemed to be prime farmland as per the Canada Land Inventory. So that's the difference between an agricultural designation and a rural designation, is that the soils in the rural are not deemed to be prime, and so this property would not be subject to the provincial policies for prime agricultural farmland. They don't qualify as such. The other comment was received, which I will include in the next report that comes to council, had to do was from the property directly to the north. of the proposed development, and they were concerned about drainage as a result of development near them. But I believe that the SPCA will be looking at drainage as part of their process, and there haven't been any concerns raised by any of the circulated agencies regarding water management or any of that on the site. But I will add those comments in the next report. They just came in late last week, so they are not included here. Yeah, so in terms of the circulation, we did receive the complete application. It was circulated to all the neighbors and circulated to agencies, and the notice was gone out for this public meeting, and we have received some comments back from the public and are holding the public meeting. So at this time, I think it's appropriate to answer any questions that anybody on the committee or from the public might have regarding this. And I think, so to recap, the proposal is to rezone the subject lands in order to facilitate the development of 2 residential lots in the hamlet of Burgoyne. This meeting is for information purposes only, and I will return at a subsequent meeting with a recommendation.
Thank you, Tessa. So I guess there's any questions for clarification on her report? Councillor Manali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to understand a few things. The first one would be how one municipal authority deals with half of a hamlet and not dealing with the other half of the municipal authority, Aaron Eldesley. I believe that's Aaron Eldesley on the other side of the street. So do we not ask them for comment?
They were circulated. They didn't provide any comments.
Okay. So that's how we deal with a split hamlet, is just ask them for comment.
Yeah, anything, I believe it's within 1 kilometer of any other municipality they get circulated on, just as town staff here get circulated on. It's in the same process, so they have an opportunity to comment, and yeah, we haven't received it.
All right, thank you. I have a second question about it's R1-2 designation, correct? And how are we sure that we're maximizing the density of the property for the number of lots? I realize they have to have room for septic in this particular case, but is there an opportunity to suggest that these lots should be used for more maximum density dwellings as opposed to single-family residence? Like, how are you pursuing that? It's already been decided, or could there be 3 lots there out of the 2 parcels of land? Like it's already been all discussed and thought about.
Well, the applicant brought forward this proposal for 2 lots, and the D54 study that was received, it does recognize that these lots can be supported with that lot size, but it is pretty close. There's not a lot of extra room in terms of nitrate impact. So based on the results of the D54 and doing it on private services, I don't think you could go any smaller. But I mean, if Stu wants to comment on that, he can. But I don't. Yeah, that would be my kind of sense of it is that we likely wouldn't get much smaller than this on private services, and also just because of the rural nature of the hamlet, this is an inappropriate lot size for this area.
Councillor Mike Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering about the archaeological assessment stage 1 and 2. I understand nothing was found, which wasn't too surprising. But what kind of a cost did the owner of that land? What kind of a cost do they incur with stage 1 and 2 of the archaeological assessment?
I don't know, but I think they're typically around $2,000 to $4,000, depending on. So somewhere in the $2,000 to $4,000 range.
Okay. So my follow-up: the stage 1 and 2, could you explain to me when an archaeological assessment is called for, and we have to do it, is we obviously take into consideration the area, like if we're dealing with the Saugeen River, for example, at the mouth, or over by Scubby's Point. I mean, there's some sensitive areas in this area where archaeological assessments are probably higher level. Is there stage 1, 2, and 3? Just so I understand, or is it just stage 1 and 2? Like, what's the most basic? So there, stage 1 and 2 had to be done here. Right?
Yeah.
So just explain that.
Yeah. So I believe there's 4 stages, is as far as you can go, and you don't do 3 or 4 unless anything is found. So 3 and 4 only occur if you actually find archaeological resources. A stage 1 is purely a desktop exercise. So you look at archives and the history of the site, mapping, that sort of thing. Stage 2 is the physical assessment of the site. That's when you go and you dig the holes and actually go on the property and look at it. So generally, you always do a stage 1 and a stage 2. And we ask for archaeological assessments based on a Ministry of Culture, Tourism, and Sports checklist. So there's a checklist that they put out, and if it checks enough boxes, if the property checks enough boxes in the checklist, then it's deemed to have high archaeological potential, okay. And that's when we ask for it. And without doing a archaeological master plan for the community, we can't really say which areas might be higher potential or not, okay, beyond what's provided in the checklist.
Thanks for that explanation, Tess. I appreciate it. Are there situations in this municipality where stage 1 only is required, or is it always stage 1 and 2 minimum?
Usually, and that's it's pretty much always stage 1 and 2. Once it's deemed to have high archaeological potential. Yeah.
Never just stage 1.
Not that I've seen. I've only ever seen the 2.
Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tessa, much of Burgoyne is serviced by a community well, and they service a bunch of the properties. Is it proposed that these properties would be connected into that service system, or would they have their own wells?
I believe they're proposed to have their own wells.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the report. For me, all these that I have looked at thus far, the zoning of this property is particularly confusing. It's on one hand in the settlement area of Burgoyne, but on the other hand, it's got this A49H zoning that says you can't build on it. On one hand, we have it zoned agriculture in Saugeen Shores, but the county's got it zoned rural, so that it's both, from our perspective, good farmland, but from the county's perspective, not. It gets farmed. I guess it's good farmland. But could you just explain to me what we were trying to do here? Like when we put the zoning in place, like particularly this A49H with the holding that didn't permit residential structures, but we did put it in the settlement area. Like what was? Do we have any idea what the council at the time was trying to accomplish by doing that, or was there? Is there? I just want to know if there's something I'm not understanding about this, because it's really both and I don't understand.
Just for clarity, though, the county official plan doesn't zone it; it just designates it as it could be a range of uses, which is one is we zoned it A49-1 or thank you H49H, and for the purposes that they probably want them to come back so that you can have this public meeting. I suspect that it would be to come back, you'd have a public meeting when the severances were granted so that you can deal with the zoning at that time. And I'm speculating, of course.
Just add to that, Mr. Mayor, and you're right. But the B clause in that is no residential buildings. Like there's an archaeological assessment shall be submitted, but when council passed this, they said, and we also won't let any residential structures shall be permitted. So it's just we want you to do an archaeological assessment, but we won't let you build anything. I just don't get it. Maybe there's nothing there to get, but I just wonder if there's more. Is there more information, or is there some tactic that was being played here, or some intent that I'm not understanding? That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm not sure. I mean, the no residential development is quite common, right? So this like it looks like there had been a previous severance on this lot. So when this other parcel was created, it's very likely that then the rest of the parcel was rezoned to prohibit residential development, as is common when you sever a property in an agricultural area. It could be too that the settlement expansion for the OP and the zoning didn't coincide, right? There could have been years when it was brought into the settlement area, but the zoning didn't come to match it, and that's why we're going through that process now, right, in order to match these two things. In terms of I agree that there's a bit of a strange logic in terms of having an archaeological assessment but then not allowing development. That does seem contradictory to me as well, but this area must have been deemed to have high potential if that holding was there. So, probably just to protect against any potential resources that might be on that area, but I'm not sure exactly.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so that helps a bit. I guess the one thing though is you said what may have happened was when we severed off, when the one property was severed off, we put in the provision B, here's your severance, but no residential buildings. But that's what we're proposing to do again here, right? That's what we're talking about now is to do the same thing. We're going to sever more houses off, and we're also going to we're going to put that provision back in. But then, I just wonder, will we attempt as part of this, or is it possible to attempt? Because I'm giving suggestions and asking for information here. Is it possible to attempt to clarify this or clean it up? Like if it's our intent not to have more building, then we can say that, and that should be our intent. But if it's not, then maybe we shouldn't say it. We shouldn't say, if you know what I mean. We should have a clear approach and say what we mean here, and then that's the way it should be. And I don't have any trouble with what's being proposed here in general. It's just I would just like this to end up more clear for everybody, for the neighbors, for the owner of this property, etc., than it is right now. Because I can certainly appreciate how a member of the public and even the property owner could be confused about what's possible on this property and what's not. And we should attempt to aim at less confusion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks. I don't disagree with any of that, and I think there's probably room to do that. But in terms of this is really the last undeveloped part of the settlement area in Burgoyne. So in terms of thinking long term, it'd be appropriate to think about that at the time when we're doing an OPA, to think about is Burgoyne going to expand beyond what's there, because this really is the last, one of the few areas, potential properties left in the hamlet.
Okay. No other question for clarification. How much would the applicant like to speak to this? Anybody from the applicant? Nope. Okay. Okay. Anybody from the public? No. So, Jay, did you want to speak? You're dying to say something out there. Say something. Squeak or something. No. So if there's no... Well, thanks very much, Tessa. And if there's no further questions, then we will... I'll just read the recommendation, and we don't need it, but it's the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores receive proposed zoning bylaw amendment Z-4-18.44 as information, and that staff will return at a subsequent meeting with a recommendation. Any discussion on the recommendation? All in favor? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is a motion to adjourn. It's been moved by Councillor Madison and seconded by Councillor Mike Myatt that this Planning Committee meeting of March 19th, 2018 hereby adjourned at 6:53 p.m. All in favor? Adjourned.